We have a new panel coming up right now on open data. We have seen a large number of panels that address information. Irene said that the challenge that we have ahead of us is to process data with different origins, different sources. The issue of privacy and the issue of cross-border data flows. Because this is pretty large and we have many initiatives to have this open data available, and this is the issue that I would like to address with two friends of ours from the South School of Internet Governance. My colleagues from Brazil, we're not going to have Portuguese since there's only translation English Spanish. So they're going to be speaking English. So our friends that are English speaking, at least they can understand directly from you. Can we start directly with them? My friends, let me welcome you to the South School of Internet Governance, Daniela. Tudo bem?
Tudo bem.
Tudo bem.
Muchas gracias por estar aquí. Let's switch to English. Because we don't have translation from Portuguese. And thank you very much for being with us this morning. Let's go to English now. And my dear friend Mark and Daniela, they are in Brazil. Daniela is in Porto Alegre, ¿sí?
Yeah.
Y Mark está en Sao Paulo. Let me tell you that I miss so much visiting Brazil. It's a country that I love so much. You know, I speak the language, I love the music, and I really miss you guys. I miss caipirinhas, the beach, all my friends there. So I hope that we are able to travel, and I know that you like Buenos Aires as well. I've seen some comments from Mark in social networks remembering his visits to Buenos Aires. So let's go to the issue that brings us together today. In several panels, we have been checking and talking about the big amount of data that is produced by several applications and platforms and by us uploading information all the time. And we have this concept of open data that countries are promoting or abiding by to different organizations or movements around the world. So you being experts in these fields, I would like to have a dialogue with you in this. We have like half an hour. And let me ask you some questions. First, Daniela, what is the relevance of open data for development of new businesses and new technologies? I know you are very much involved in the development of intelligent cities or smart cities. And Daniela, welcome to the South School of Internet Governance. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. Good morning. It's truly an honor to be here today to talk about open data. And actually, it's a special occasion because I was a fellow of the school in 2013. And so to have this opportunity to come back here and share some thoughts about open data with Mark, it's very exciting. So thank you, Olga, for the invite, and congratulations for this huge event. So about the question. When we think about open data, we must highlight the social and economic value of data reuse. We are in a digital era with the development of new technologies and artificial intelligence. And for this purpose, we need data because data is essential, especially in a context of economic retraction from a pandemic crisis. So it's important that we guarantee the access to the data and the possibility to reuse this data in new business, in new services. When we think about data access, we think about opportunity to maximize the welfare of the consumers and the citizens. And open data is about that. It's a way to unlocking the power of data. For example, we have the open government. The open government benefits goes beyond transparency and democratic control, as the data access also allows the reuse, which is more crucial than ever to the current development of data-driven innovation including the context of Internet of Things and also smart cities. From the economic point of view, the data access and the data reuse reduce barriers for new entrants in the market, and also allows and promotes a fair competition in the market. And in this regard, we have some experience to share, like it's the case of European Union, that the new directive of European Union recognized the value of the reuse of public service information and introduced the concept of high-value data sets. And for this purpose, the directive determines that the data will be available free of charge in machine-readable format, provided via application programs interface, APIs, and where relevant as a book download. So all these initiatives is to promote access to data and this reuse of data, which nowadays is more crucial than ever.
Mark, what are the FAIR principles and why it is important to pay attention to them? Mark?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here talking with all of you today. So there's a fancy name for that. It's the FAIR Guiding Principles for Scientific Data Management and Stewardship. But at the end of the day, what it means is how do we make data be something that's a force for the good and something that is actually mostly headed in a direction that it works for everyone. So by FAIR, we need to break down each letter. So first, it's findable, which means that that data should be able to be found not only by machines but by people as well. You need to have access to this data in a way that you can actually get to whatever you actually need without it being something that's overly complicated. And those of us who deal with data know that this is potentially one of the biggest problems right now, to be completely honest. Finding the data that you need can sometimes be a huge hassle. It can be buried, within a lot of different data sets, sometimes that don't relate to each other. So this is actually a very important principle, which leads us straight to what the A stands for, which is accessible. So once the data is actually found, you need to know how to get access to that. How are there any permissions that you need to get? Is there any kind of term that you need to sign? How do you actually work with the data, right? Ideally, it has very few barriers, but at the same time, you need to be able to understand what are the barriers, how can I actually get to this data? And the I stands for interoperable. So it's very rare that data works alone by itself. It's almost impossible, actually. So the idea that you have 2, 3, or many data sets that can actually communicate with each other is often very important. It won't happen that they will be perfectly aligned with each other. You always have to clean something up, change something up. But sometimes the differences are so big that it's not worth the research time to actually make them work with each other. So at that point, as useful as it would be to use them together, you need to discard something, which is a shame. So the interoperability and following standards, following metadata standards is incredibly important. And finally, for the R, you have reusable. So this is something that I would say it's new, quotes, because as we advance in data research, we start to notice that a lot of research doesn't really live behind a good trail to be followed. A lot of research stands for its own sake, or it exists within a certain context. And then when somebody actually needs to get back to that, and this feeds into the other principles as well, you end up saying, okay, how do I actually make further progress on this? So when whoever is already dealing with data or intends to deal with data, which is pretty much everyone in the next decade, just this fair guiding principles are actually something very important to think about as a basis for everything that you're doing, for any initiative that you take. It's the kind of thing that you think about first, not last, right? It's the first thing that you try to engage with. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much. Many questions come to my mind, but I want to ask Daniela now, are there other initiatives in open data beyond the government sector? Because it seems for us, citizens, that is the government the one that is obliged or should do this open data initiatives, like, for example, businesses and non-for-profit organizations. Daniela.
Thank you, Olga. Yes, it's a good question. Many initiatives in the field of open data come from the government. Sometimes even the expression open data is used to refer to open government as if it were a synonym. The open government started more or less 15 years ago, and it's particularly significant because of the quantity and the centrality of the data. But the most important, it's because the openness of the data is determined by law. So it's not a choice in many countries. These initiatives of open government were stimulated in many international forums and international organizations, like the case of United Nations, G8, OECD, European Union, and today several countries are committed to open their data, as is the case of Brazil, where we can find in the website of the government some data without needing any identification or access credentials. Although the importance of the open government, it would be needed that if this movement could expand to other areas with the advance of the open data, with companies, business, non-profit organizations, if international organizations. Actually, it would be a great opportunity if we have this advance of the movement of open data. We already have some examples of initiatives like that, like the case of Uber, Thomson Reuters. We have many international organizations that are opening their data too, as is the case of World Bank. But we still have some challenges with companies because it's still hard to justify economically the open of the data. We have the fear of the competitors. We have the free riding problem. But besides that, the Open Data Institute conducted a study of 3 companies that decide to open their data. And the study shows how such actions really generate value from these companies and also stimulate the innovation. But taking such challenge into account, we could stimulate the initiatives of policies of data sharing and data reuse with the private sector. It could be the first step for a journey that could achieve in the long run the open data. So it's important that the regulators and the countries start with policies of data shared mobility of data within the private sector. Examples of these are the open banking, open finance. We have also the data portability. And now in UK is having the smart data, which the proposal is to expand to other markets, not only for finance, but going through other markets, like it's the case of communications and energy. So these are good examples how we can start this movement, small, but generate value for all the markets. So thank you.
That's very interesting. I didn't know that some private initiatives were there to share information, because for companies, information is always something important to keep away from everyone because it's kind of a secret.
Yeah.
The secret sauce of their businesses and success. That's very, very interesting. Thank you very much, Daniela. And Mark, what are the current and potential uses of open data in the health sector, especially considering that our motto for this school of 5 days is how internet and technology can enhance and help the economies in our region after COVID-19?
Thank you, Olga and Daniela. So yes, I have been researching the intersection of data, internet governance, and health for 3-4 years now, and it's really interesting to see such a complex field that doesn't actually benefit right now that much from open data. It's slowly starting to benefit from open data, and seeing how much change that's generating already. We saw a lot of that during the COVID-19 pandemic. We're having a very, very difficult time developing solutions, but this is with a lot of open data being shared. Imagine if it wasn't, right? A lot of universities have engaged in open research models, and a lot of companies as well, understanding that this is something that's needed for the greater good. So open data in health, it comes from the movement of open access to all research data, right? But in certain areas, this is particularly concerning when you have a paper about an important academic paper on health locked behind a paywall, right? This was funded with the university's money, with the researchers' money and time, and then it's locked behind a paywall for some reason, unable to benefit the greater public with that knowledge. So this is something that really shouldn't be happening, because this is a common good. This is something in particular that you can argue that this is for the public good. This can't be locked behind a paywall. And from that concept of opening the papers comes the concept of actually opening the data, the actual research data. Now, what could be the benefits of that? And whenever I'm thinking about this, I think this is the original intention of the internet, isn't it? If you go back to all those books about the creation of the internet, it was all about sharing researches, not overlapping different research lines, trying to contribute to a single goal. And for an area as complex as this one, this is exactly what is needed. You can't have too much overlap. You need to be constantly evolving the ability of people to research faster and better. And not only that, but when I look towards what actual impact that could have, let's be practical here. So sometimes you will have research on the effect of a medication on a population, let's say, and that will be released in Portuguese on a specific journal, and then in French in a specific journal. And then you have a lot of data that's spread, and it requires somebody who's actually very actively engaged in that to pick every publication and start to make correlations. If we were working with open data, you could just gather all of that, and you would see, okay, there's this undesirable effect that's being generated in these populations. And that wouldn't take the massive amounts of investment that it takes right now to do that. You could simply gather the data as a researcher, a postgraduate student of a related area, and you could do that. And thinking even further, we have this vision that with all of this data, all of this different knowledge about individuals and health, we could get into what would be ideal for medicines, which is what is called stratified medicine. This is a tough term to translate. It's basically medicine for each person. So instead of you going to the pharmacy and taking this standardized medication, you would be able to take medicine that's made for your body, that's actually good for you in particular. not good for 99% of people, but we can only achieve that kind of progress with open data, with understanding how everything works at a very granular level. And you can think, right, it follows naturally. That all sounds very good, but I'm pretty sure that in other sessions you have been discussing about privacy, and that's a big concern. It's not something that I think the community has a good answer for right now. It is very difficult to balance public good and privacy, especially when it comes to something sensitive as that. What has been happening, this is something that, in the research that I have been following has been consistent. Some people want to be data donor. Some people want to actually be out there helping further science in that way. And it can be that this can be an opt-in thing in which the person understands that there is some risk associated with that, but that we are trying to work together for a greater good. I do understand as problematic the idea that a government would make this the default, for example. That would probably be complicated. But as long as we keep in mind, an attempt to balance privacy and the common good, I think that this is something that could actually take us to a better place, a place in which, health, technology, and data can all work better together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I have a question from our fellows, from Roberto Trivino. He's asking, how do you see the process of open data evolving in Latin America?
For me or for Mark?
For both of you, whoever wants to start.
Yeah, here in the countries of Latin America, we have a lot of initiatives from government. We have a lot of laws that determine that the government need to open their data, because the data from government is public. So we need to comply with this law. So here we have good standards of transparency from government, and we are in a very good position from government. All countries here are evolution in this field. But from companies, we are in baby steps with the open data. Here in Brazil now we have the new law of data protection that's bring the data portability. So it will be a challenge to achieve the data portability, and it's an opportunity for stimulate the data sharing within the private sector. We have also other initiatives here, like the open banking in Brazil is starting now with the Banco Central, which is the federal bank of Brazil. And we have these small initiatives, but from the government, it's very, very good established the open data in the government in many countries here in the Latin America.
Thank you, Daniela. Mark, your final comments about the region?
Yes, I would complement that. I think Daniela summarized it perfectly. I would just like to recommend to anybody who's interested in this, there is a website called Open Data Barometer. And over there, you have a regional ranking of the different countries of Latin America and how they rank in relation to the global readiness of open data. And you will see that actually some of the countries in the region are quite advanced. You have Mexico, Uruguay, Brazil, Colombia, Chile, Argentina, Peru. They're all pretty far ahead in terms of readiness of open data. So while others, such as Panama, El Salvador, Venezuela, then they are less ready. But I would say that to have some countries in the region that are already quite advanced in this is a very good precedent. right? It's a region that has seen that kind of push due to our academic tradition, to our social history. I think this has been very important in pushing ahead the concept of open data, and you can see that this is having some impact already. So it's pretty good. I think we could continue to be a region that develops this, and especially if we work together, right? Especially if we connect data between different countries in the region and different actors and governments, that would be actually very beneficial to a region. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I have some more questions. We have like 5 minutes more. Is there, from Mariana Otic, is there a regulation, regional or global, that makes it obligar? How do you say obligar in English? Oh my God. To make it mandatory, enforces, thank you, state to open data? That's one question. The other one, is there evidence that open data contributes to the science of behavior for governments? And finally, what can be done from civil society to promote open data?
Yeah, from the point of the government, the open data, it's very important because it's the transparency for the government stimulate the better services, better for the citizens, more benefits for the citizens, stimulate the reduction of corruption and other crimes with the public sector. So we can point that the open data is very good for the government, not only for the point of economic of the reuse and for the scientific point of the open of the data, but also for the government. It stimulates better services and better conduction of the government. We have a lot of laws here in the Latin America that determines that the government need to open their data. So we have these laws, and in the international level, we have some guidelines and that stimulate these actions from the government. It's like the case of OECD that stimulate the members now of the OECD to open their data. So we have these initiatives.
Thank you very much. Mark, any comments, final comments?
Yes, I think that civil society has an important role to play in opening data, because sure, from one aspect, the people who are doing the research are the ones who will be driving this process. But honestly, there's a need for demands for open data to be generated. There's a need for governments, for the private sector to actually hear that this is needed. Because I'll tell you, as somebody who is, partially academia, partially private sector, I walk this tightrope. And I know very well that if you want to try to champion and defend open data, you need to be able to point to something to justify it to the decision makers. You need to be able to say, look, there's a demand here. There's a use case here. There are people who are trying to do work with this data and they would benefit a lot. You need to be able, from within the decision process, to be able to point to people who are actually writing articles, who are actually carrying out discussions, sending emails. If you are doing that kind of movement, you're actually helping the people who are trying to push for this to happen. And I can say that from personal experience. So if you have an article, even if it's on a blog, whatever, you can actually get your hands on. If it's on a newspaper, even better. But wherever you can get the word out, I would like to see open data about this. Then if somebody is actually trying to push this forward, they can go and say, but look, there's this article that clearly shows the demand for this, and that helps out a lot, way more than you would think it would. So that is an important step, actually talking about this in a public manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Daniela. I appreciate very much your participation. There are many past fellows of the school that are now invited as speakers, experts, because you are now well-known experts in your fields and friends, of course, of the school. And also some of you are invited to moderate panel. That was the case of Sandy Palma from Honduras yesterday. She was moderating the panel about cybersecurity. So it's an honor for us to have you here. I miss you guys. I hope to see you somewhere in Brazil, I hope, or here in Argentina or somewhere in the world. And I wish you that you are safe, that in good health, and we stay in touch. Thank you very much for being with us this morning.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure. See you all.
Saludos de Adrián and the team.